going to talk about the new series that we're launching called Is Feminism Cooked? I'm going to go through a bit about what the series is going to go over and what inspired it. And then the bulk of the episode is going to be focusing on the rift between what I'm calling PERFs and tags, so Palestine-Excluding Radical Feminists, ZioFems, or FashFems, or genocidal fems, or whatever term you're comfortable with. And I'm not sure if I coined this or not, but tags, so TERFs Against Genocide, is the Feminism Cooked series. Does feminism have an incoherent meaning? You have a lot of talk about who's a real feminist and who's a fake feminist, who's a bad feminist and who's a good feminist, who's a ball palmer, who's not, who's a good sister, who isn't, who's a rape apologist, who isn't a rape apologist. Those of you who are in and around feminist circles know this very well. So raise the question, what even is this feminism? I think that feminism is basically an ideology. From the beginning was kind of a WASP bourgeois project from and for, objectively at least, a particular slice of women in a particular part of the world in a particular time period that gets cast as universal. It's quite clear that there is a battle going on for what basically it means when someone says they're a feminist. It's a very important part of their identity. And it's ideological feminists. They get very mad. Let me tell you, they get very mad when you poke at that. They're used to being the ones that criticize the patriarchy, criticize, the women who are supplicant to it, or oppressed women. Feminists are very uncomfortable when someone analyzes them. They tend to, not react particularly well. And oftentimes what I get is, well, that's not feminism. Those FashFems or the ZioFems aren't feminists, or the pro-Palestine feminists, they're not real feminists because they're, Hamas supporters. Like, that's a terrible thing, but we'll get to that later. And isn't it convenient? So it's basically like, I'm a good person, I'm a feminist, therefore feminism is good, and I'm a good feminist. And anything that I don't like, somehow that's not feminism, or it's bad feminism. And how I like to look at things is as the totality. You have to take the bad, the good, the neutral. All of that comes out of feminism. And I would suggest that from the beginning of feminism, there's been a fascistic element, potentiality. And we're seeing that now in quite grave relief. Now, what I'm not saying is that every person who ever has dabbled in feminism or says they're a feminist is fascistic. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that there's misandrous element. There's a female supremacist element in there. It's just there. Unless you actively don't want to see it and only want to think that feminism is sugar and spice and everything nice. But most feminists don't want to look at that shit. They don't want to look under the cover. They don't want to lift up the rock. It's easier. And I understand that, to be like, oh, they're not real feminists, or they're, fake feminists, fair weather feminists, stupid feminists, ignorant feminists. I was told that quite a bit when I started to apply both the psychoanalytical critique and the historical materialist one. Oh my God, was I told, you don't know what you're talking about, stick in your lane. And I want to be like, what? I'm not a woman? Ain't I a woman? I birthed 3 babies. Not that that's the only thing, but it's a pretty important thing, civilizationally. So what do feminists want? The first series of articles that I did, I put under this rubric, Feminism and Authorized Political Psychoanalysis. What do feminists want? What does feminism want? What do they desire? What do they enjoy? They can't recognize, or they don't want to hold up to the light. And this project, as Feminism Cooked, has come out of that. So quite critical, ruthless critique of all that's existing, that feminism does not get a pass because of their women, or because patriarchy, and any of these cards. I don't accept any cards, sorry, that preclude a political movement or a philosophy or project from being criticized. So in terms of morbid symptoms, my thesis is that feminism is a morbid symptom. The old is dying, the new is struggling to be born. Now is a time of morbid symptoms. Is feminism cooked? Can the center stand? It's not just the PERF tag contradiction. That the class ones have been there from the beginning, of course, and feminism is something that originated in the West in a particular time and space, historical moment. But there's also the TERFs versus the TRAs. It's another fault line. Oh, any feminist who says they're for trans rights or that trans women are women isn't a real feminist or is a bad feminist. Now, the problem with this is there is a bushel. I would say there's more pro-trans feminists than TERF feminists. And rather than be like, oh, they're not good feminists, they're bad feminists, it's to try to reckon with that came out of feminism. The gender Borg, was also birthed out of feminism. You guys thought so far out of the gender box that you made men and women fungible. You can draw a straight line from some feminist theory to transgenderism. You just can. You can deny that. I'm not saying it's the only thing. There's a lot of money behind it, and all the psychologists and the drug companies and the perverts and all this stuff. So I'm not saying that. But to say that this came out of nowhere, you're lying to yourselves. And I think that there's something really important that we can try to get at through this contradiction, through this confusion. What does this tell us about feminism? That feminism birthed both the TERF and the TRA. Because it did. I mean, one final thing, just to give you an idea about what I want to cover in this Is Feminism Cooked series, or maybe I'll go back to Feminism Unauthorized Psychoanalysis, because I love that picture of Marlon Brando and Vivian Lee from A Streetcar Named Desire. That's reading my own desire, perhaps. In what way is Zionism Jewish as feminism is to women? If you look at how Zionists treat Jewish people who aren't Zionist enough or critical of Zionists, and compare that to how a lot of feminists treat women who don't comply with the feminism, who aren't good women or good feminists. There's a lot of similarities there. Feminism is a control project. The target has always been women, not primarily men or the patriarchy, whatever you want to call it. Women have been the target. The housewife was the main target in the 1960s. The feminists went after the housewife. They hated the housewife. They had to change her consciousness and teach her about how she was just acting out her patriarchal role. Now, I'm not saying that housewifery was fantastic for everybody. What I'm saying is the feminists went after the housewife in the 60s. They just did. They did. Gloria Steinem did. The feminine mystique lady did. Simone de Beauvoir did. She went as far as to say that women should not be allowed to stay home and just be wives and mothers, because if we allow them to, wait for it, ladies, too many women will make that choice. How freedom, how lovely, how feminist, how great. Is she a bad feminist? Was Gloria Steinem a bad feminist? Maybe. What I'm saying is it's a more complicated thing than we like to think, than feminists like to think. Most things are, maybe because they're too close to it. But I think there's a lot to learn there, not just for theoretical relevance or historical interest or to poke sticks at feminists, but women aren't going anywhere. Sex relations aren't going anywhere. Sexual politics aren't going anywhere. So if I'm right, and it's not just me saying this, if this is the decline and fall of feminism, what's going to come out of it? And what can we learn or try to learn from what's going on right now? And on that note, I will bring up Laura, and we're going to get into the first chapter of Is Feminism Cooked?, which is the tags and the PERFs. It leapt off social media and it came face to face at Philia.